In the 1950s, grandmas made no-chew dinners that mattered. Their kitchen work didn't just fill plates. It turned tough ingredients into fork softs in under an hour. These 60 forgotten dinners might sound impossible today, but they filled tables with warmth and satisfaction. Let's discover 60 tender dinners that show how grandmas made magic without fancy techniques. Velvet tuna and noodle bake became the weeknight hero when Grandma gathered everyone for Tuesday suppers around the kitchen table. She boiled wide egg noodles until they were exceptionally soft, passed al dente into truly tender territory, then drained them thoroughly into her trusty colander. In her favorite blue casserole dish, she mixed the pale yellow noodles with 2 cans of flaked tuna to a can of cream of mushroom soup that created silky beige sauce, a cup of whole milk, and a cup of bright green frozen peas. The mixture went into a 350-degree oven for 30 minutes until bubbling around the edges and heated through completely. The result was a casserole where every component was spoon-tender, the noodles practically dissolved on the tongue, the tuna flaked apart with zero resistance, and the creamy golden sauce coated everything in velvety smoothness. Grandma often topped it with crushed golden potato chips in the final 5 minutes, creating beautiful texture contrast that made everyone smile as they gathered around her table, sharing stories about their day. Cloud-soft chicken and rice. Comfort Bake filled Grandma's kitchen with the most wonderful aroma when friends dropped by unexpectedly for supper. She cut boneless chicken breasts into tiny half-inch cubes, much smaller than typical recipes called for, so each piece would cook until it fell apart at the slightest fork pressure. She combined these pale pink chicken pieces with long-grain white rice, 2 cans of cream of chicken soup, creating a rich ivory sauce, and enough golden chicken broth to make the mixture quite liquid. Everything went into a deep glass casserole dish covered tightly with shiny aluminum foil to trap steam, then baked at 325 degrees for a full 50 minutes until the rice was plump and tender and the chicken pieces were so soft they shredded with a spoon. The steam cooking method created chicken so delicate it had a cloud-like texture, and rice grains that were beautifully soft without any firmness remaining. She stirred in golden butter cubes before serving, making the whole dish glisten invitingly as family gathered around the table. Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue. Buttery shepherd's pie became comfort food perfection when Grandma served it for Saturday suppers with the whole family gathered together. She started with ground beef, cooked until beautifully crumbly and brown, then simmered it in rich brown beef gravy for an extra 15 minutes until the meat practically dissolved into the sauce, creating a texture closer to thick stew. She added colorful frozen mixed vegetables, bright green peas, orange carrots, golden corn, and continued simmering until they were completely tender with soft textures throughout. The savory meat mixture went into her rectangular baking dish, then she topped it with fluffy white mashed potatoes, whipped with extra butter and warm milk until they were cloud-like and smooth as silk, spreading them gently to create beautiful swirls. A quick run under the broiler created golden peaks on top that looked absolutely beautiful. Each forkful combined velvety mashed potatoes with gravy-soaked meat that required minimal effort, making this ideal for weekend gatherings when everyone wanted hearty, satisfying dinner that brought smiles around the table. Silky turkey tetrazzini transformed Sunday's leftover turkey into Monday's celebration dinner when the family gathered around Grandma's table again. She shredded cooked turkey into the tiniest possible pieces, almost minced into delicate white strands, then heated it in a rich ivory cream sauce made from golden butter, flour, chicken broth, heavy cream, and a generous splash of sherry that added wonderful depth. Thin spaghetti cooked well beyond package directions until genuinely soft throughout with a beautiful pale color, then got tossed with the creamy turkey mixture and sautéed mushrooms, sliced paper thin so they'd nearly melt into the sauce. Everything combined in a buttered oval casserole dish, got topped with golden grated Parmesan cheese, creating a beautiful crust, and baked just until heated through and lightly golden. The finished dish was so creamy and inviting that it could practically be eaten with a spoon. The pasta was tender enough to cut with a fork edge, the turkey pieces melted on the tongue, and the sauce was silky smooth. This made wonderful comfort food for family dinners throughout the week. Tender beef stroganoff. Over soft egg noodles became Grandma's answer when she wanted elegant food for Thursday suppers with neighbors who dropped by. She cut beef sirloin into the smallest possible strips, thin brown ribbons, then simmered them in rich beef broth for 20 minutes until they were fall-apart tender with beautiful color. Mushrooms, sliced incredibly thin, nearly disappeared into the rich brown sauce made from the beef cooking liquid. Tangy white sour cream and a touch of Dijon mustard that added wonderful flavor. Wide golden egg noodles cooked until they were completely soft and tender, well past the firm stage, then got tossed with melted butter so they glistened beautifully and wouldn't stick together. She served the beef mixture ladled generously over the buttery noodles in her prettiest serving bowls, making sure every serving had plenty of creamy sauce. The combination meant each bite was rich, tender, and inviting, yet still tasted sophisticated enough for special occasions when friends gathered around her welcoming table, sharing laughter and good conversation over wonderful home cooking. These 5 tender dinners show how grandmas created comfort at the table, turning everyday ingredients into meals so soft they practically melted away. From tuna bakes to stroganoff, each dish brought families together without requiring any chewing effort. Simple cooking, pure comfort, and memories made around the kitchen. Let's discover 5 more classics. Old-fashioned creamed chipped beef on soft toast appeared on breakfast tables when Grandma wanted something warm and comforting to start the day with family. She tore dried beef into tiny shreds, making sure no large tough pieces remained, then rinsed them under warm water to remove excess salt before patting dry. In her cast-iron skillet, she melted golden butter until it sizzled, stirred in flour to create a pale roux, then slowly whisked in whole milk until a smooth white sauce formed with beautiful creamy texture. The shredded beef went into this sauce, turning it a lovely tan color, and she let it simmer gently until thickened and bubbling. Meanwhile, white bread toasted lightly, just enough to be warm but still soft, then got placed on plates. She ladled the creamy beef mixture generously over each slice, covering it completely with the rich sauce. The result was pure comfort. The sauce soaked into the soft toast, the beef was tender enough to need no chewing, and everything was warm and satisfying for morning gatherings around her kitchen table. Melt-in-your-mouth green bean casserole became the Thanksgiving side dish that everyone requested when families gathered for holiday meals together. Grandma used canned green beans, not fresh or frozen, because they were already beautifully soft and tender, and draining them thoroughly before combining with 2 cans of cream of mushroom soup that created a rich beige sauce. She added a splash of milk to make the sauce extra creamy and smooth, then folded everything together gently in her oval baking dish. The mixture went into a 350-degree oven for 20 minutes until bubbling around the edges with wonderful aroma. Just before serving, she topped it with crispy fried onions that added beautiful golden brown color and texture contrast for those who wanted it. The green beans were so tender they practically melted away. The mushroom sauce was silky smooth, and everything was warm and inviting. This became a staple at holiday gatherings, not just because it tasted wonderful, but because even elderly relatives and young children could enjoy it easily, while everyone shared stories around the festive table. Velvety scalloped potatoes with ham filled Sunday afternoons with incredible aroma when Grandma prepared dinner for the whole family gathering. She sliced potatoes paper-thin using her trusty mandolin, creating nearly translucent circles that would cook until melt in your mouth tender. Diced ham got cut into the tiniest cubes imaginable so no large chunks would require chewing effort. In her deep casserole dish, she layered the pale potato slices with pink ham pieces, sprinkling each layer with flour, salt, and pepper before repeating. She made a rich cream sauce by heating milk with butter until steaming, then poured it over the layers until everything was just covered with ivory liquid. The dish went into a 350-degree oven covered with foil for 45 minutes, then uncovered for 15 more until the top turned beautiful golden brown and the potatoes were fork-tender throughout. Each serving showed gorgeous layers of creamy potatoes and ham that fell apart at the slightest touch, making this perfect comfort food for Sunday suppers when everyone gathered around her welcoming table. Ultra-creamy macaroni and cheese became Wednesday night comfort when Grandma knew everyone needed something warm and satisfying midweek. She cooked elbow macaroni well beyond the package directions, a full 12 minutes instead of 7, until the pasta was genuinely soft, with no firm center remaining, and creating tender, pale yellow tubes. Meanwhile, she made a rich cheese sauce by melting butter, whisking in flour, then gradually adding warm milk while stirring constantly until smooth and thickened to beautiful ivory cream. Sharp cheddar cheese got stirred in until completely melted, creating a gorgeous golden orange sauce that coated the spoon. The drained macaroni went into this sauce, and she stirred gently until every piece was covered in creamy cheese. She could serve it immediately from the pot, or transfer it to a buttered casserole dish and bake until bubbling for a slightly firmer texture on top. Either way, the pasta was so tender and the sauce so smooth that it practically melted away, making this beloved comfort food for family suppers throughout the week. Buttery King Ranch. Chicken bake appeared at potluck suppers when Grandma wanted to bring something that would feed a crowd gathered for community meals. She poached chicken breasts in simmering water until incredibly tender, then shredded them into tiny pieces using 2 forks. Corn tortillas got torn into small pieces and softened in warm chicken broth until pliable and tender. None of that crispy chip texture remained. In her largest casserole dish, she layered the soft tortilla pieces with shredded chicken, diced green chilies for mild flavor, cream of chicken soup mixed with cream of mushroom soup, creating rich tan sauce, and plenty of shredded cheddar cheese, creating beautiful orange layers. Everything got repeated in layers, and then baked at 350 degrees for 35 minutes until bubbling vigorously, and the cheese melted completely into golden pools. The result was magnificently soft. The tortillas dissolved into the creamy sauce. The chicken was tender beyond measure, and everything was warm and inviting. This casserole became legendary at church suppers because everyone could enjoy it comfortably while gathering together over good food and conversation. These 10 comfort meals prove grandmas knew how to create tender dinners that brought everyone together. From creamed beef to cheesy casseroles, each recipe delivered home-cooked warmth without requiring any chewing effort. Simple ingredients, loving preparation, and tables filled with families sharing meals and memories. Let's discover 10 more beloved classics. Soft tamale pie brought Southwestern comfort to Friday suppers when Grandma wanted something different for the family gathered around her table. She browned ground beef until crumbly, then simmered it with tomato sauce, canned corn, and chili powder, creating a rich red-brown filling with wonderful aroma. Instead of a cornmeal crust that might be too firm, she made soft cornmeal mush by cooking cornmeal in milk until it became smooth and thick like porridge, creating beautiful golden texture. Half of this went into the bottom of her casserole dish, then the meat filling spread over it, and the remaining cornmeal mush topped everything, creating soft layers. It baked at 375 degrees for 30 minutes until heated through and slightly firm on top, but still tender throughout. She served it with a dollop of sour cream on top that melted into the warm layers. Every bite was soft and flavorful, the cornmeal was smooth like polenta, the meat filling was tender, and everything was warm and satisfying for Friday night suppers when everyone gathered after a long week. Creamy seafood Newburg appeared at special occasion dinners when Grandma wanted to serve something elegant yet tender for celebrations with family. She used small cooked shrimp and lump crab meat, both naturally tender, and heated them gently in a rich ivory cream sauce made from butter, flour, heavy cream, and a splash of sherry that added sophisticated depth. The seafood pieces were cut small enough that they required no chewing effort whatsoever. She added a pinch of paprika for beautiful pink color and cayenne for the slightest warmth without any harsh spice. This luxurious mixture got served over soft white rice or in puff pastry shells that had been baked until golden but still tender inside. The result was restaurant-quality elegance that was still gentle enough for anyone with chewing difficulties. The seafood was naturally tender, the sauce was silky smooth, and everything was rich and satisfying. This proved you could serve impressive food at special gatherings without sacrificing tenderness for those who needed softer textures at the celebration table. Silky chicken tetrazzini with soft noodles graced Monday suppers when Grandma transformed Sunday's leftover chicken into something the whole family requested. She shredded the cooked chicken into delicate strands that were almost thread-like in their fineness, ensuring no large chunks remained. Thin spaghetti cooked until genuinely tender, past the point where any firmness remained, creating beautiful, long, pale noodles. She made a rich cream sauce by sautéing sliced mushrooms until they were very soft, then adding butter, flour, chicken broth, and heavy cream, stirring until the sauce was smooth and ivory-colored. Everything combined in her buttered casserole dish, the tender chicken, soft noodles, and creamy mushroom sauce, then got topped with grated Parmesan, creating a golden layer. It baked just until heated through, and the top turned light brown. Each serving was incredibly smooth and tender, with the pasta, chicken, and sauce blending into luxurious comfort that was easy to enjoy while the family gathered around her table, sharing the day's stories over wonderful home cooking. Sweet corn pudding casserole became the vegetable side dish that even children requested when families gathered for Sunday dinners together. Grandma combined canned cream-style corn with whole kernel corn, beaten eggs, milk, a touch of sugar, and melted butter, creating a smooth golden mixture that poured easily. This went into her buttered casserole dish and baked at 350 degrees for 45 minutes until it set into a custard-like texture that was firm enough to cut but still incredibly soft and spoonable. The top turned beautiful golden brown, while the interior stayed moist and tender like the softest pudding. Each serving could be scooped with a spoon rather than cut with a knife, and the sweet corn flavor was mild and comforting. The texture was somewhere between pudding and soufflé, soft, creamy, and absolutely melt-in-your-mouth tender. This became beloved at holiday gatherings because it was substantial enough to feel like a real side dish, but tender enough that even the youngest and oldest family members could enjoy it comfortably at the celebration table. Fall-apart pot roast in rich gravy became Sunday's centerpiece when Grandma started cooking early for the family gathering later. She seared a chuck roast in her heavy Dutch oven until brown on all sides, then added beef broth, sliced onions, and carrots, covering everything tightly with the lid. This went into a 300-degree oven for 3 full hours until the meat was so tender it fell apart at the slightest fork touch, creating gorgeous shreds rather than slices. The vegetables cooked until completely soft, the carrots practically melting and the onions dissolving into the dark brown gravy. She thickened the cooking liquid with a bit of flour to create rich gravy that coated everything beautifully. When serving time arrived, she simply pulled the meat apart with 2 forks rather than slicing, ensuring every piece was fall-apart tender. The result was pot roast so soft it required absolutely no chewing, it literally melted on the tongue, making this perfect for Sunday suppers when multiple generations gathered around her welcoming table. These 15 tender dinners showcase how grandmas turned simple ingredients into comfort that brought everyone together. From seafood to pot roast, each dish melted away effortlessly, while families gathered around tables sharing meals. No tough textures, just pure home-cooked warmth and love. Let's discover 5 more comforting classics everyone enjoyed. Moist meatloaf that melts like butter became Tuesday night comfort when Grandma shaped ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs soaked in milk, beaten eggs, and finely minced onions into her loaf pan. The secret to extraordinary tenderness was the ratio. She used twice as much soaked bread as typical recipes, making the meatloaf incredibly soft rather than dense. She topped it with ketchup, creating a beautiful red glaze, then baked it at 350 degrees for a full hour until cooked through but still moist. When sliced, the meatloaf was so tender it practically fell apart on the plate, with texture closer to a soft pâté than traditional firm meatloaf. She served it with mashed potatoes and gravy, and many family members simply mashed everything together because the meatloaf was already so soft. The flavor was rich and savory, and the texture was gentle enough that even those with dentures or chewing difficulties could enjoy every bite comfortably. This became a weekly staple because it reheated beautifully for next-day sandwiches on soft bread. Tender Salisbury steak, smothered in gravy, graced weeknight suppers when Grandma wanted something that felt special but was easy to prepare for the family. She mixed ground beef with breadcrumbs, egg, and seasonings, but her secret was adding beef broth to the meat mixture, making the patties incredibly tender rather than dense. She shaped them into oval patties that were flatter than hamburgers, then browned them quickly in a hot skillet to develop flavor. Instead of serving them crispy, she immediately covered them in rich brown mushroom gravy made from the pan drippings, beef broth, and sliced mushrooms, then simmered everything together for 15 minutes. This gentle braising made the meat patties so tender they could be cut with a fork, practically falling apart in the savory gravy. She served them over mashed potatoes or egg noodles, making sure each serving had plenty of gravy. The result was comfort food that tasted substantial, but was gentle enough for anyone needing soft textures at the supper table. Cloud-soft chicken and dumplings filled Grandma's kitchen with incredible aroma when she made this for Saturday suppers with family. She simmered chicken pieces in seasoned broth until the meat fell off the bones, then removed the chicken and shredded it into tiny pieces, discarding all bones and cartilage. For the dumplings, she mixed flour, baking powder, milk, and melted butter into a soft dough, then dropped spoonfuls directly into the simmering broth. The dumplings cooked for 15 minutes with the lid on, steaming until they were pillowy soft and had expanded to twice their size, creating beautiful white clouds floating in the golden broth. She added the shredded chicken back in, and the result was a stew-like dish, where everything was incredibly tender. The chicken shredded easily, the dumplings dissolved on the tongue, and the broth was rich and comforting. This became the ultimate comfort food for family gatherings because every component was soft and gentle, yet it tasted hearty and satisfying enough for cold weather suppers. Fork-tender Swiss steak in tomato gravy became Grandma's answer for making tough cuts of beef incredibly tender through patient braising for Sunday dinner. She pounded round steak with a meat mallet until it was thin and tenderized, then browned it quickly in a hot skillet before transferring to her Dutch oven. She covered the meat with sliced onions, canned tomatoes creating beautiful red sauce, beef broth, and seasonings, then covered everything tightly and let it simmer gently for 90 minutes. This long, slow cooking transformed the meat from potentially tough to absolutely fork tender. You could cut it with the side of a fork rather than needing a knife. The tomato gravy became thick and rich, and the onions dissolved into softness. She served it over mashed potatoes or soft egg noodles, making sure each serving was swimming in that delicious red gravy. The result was tender, flavorful, and gentle enough for anyone needing soft food at the family table. Braised short ribs falling off the bone appeared at special Sunday dinners when Grandma wanted to serve something impressive for family celebrations. She seared the meaty ribs in a hot Dutch oven until deeply brown on all sides, developing incredible flavor and color. Then she added beef broth, red wine, carrots, celery, and onions, brought everything to a simmer, covered tightly, and slid it into a 300-degree oven for 3 hours. The long, gentle braising transformed the meat into something extraordinary. It literally fell off the bones when touched with a fork, creating tender shreds rather than chewy pieces. The vegetables cooked until completely soft, and the cooking liquid reduced into a rich, dark brown sauce that was intensely flavorful. She strained this sauce and served it over the meat, which was so tender it could be eaten with just a spoon. This proved that with patience and proper cooking, even the toughest cuts became melt-in-your-mouth tender for special family gatherings around her table. These 20 tender dinners prove Grandma's mastered the art of creating meals so soft they practically melted away while bringing families together. From meatloaf to braised ribs, each recipe delivered comfort without requiring chewing effort. Which of these did your mother or grandmother make for your family gatherings? Creamed eggs on soft toast became the ultimate comfort breakfast when Grandma needed something gentle yet nourishing for family members recovering from illness or dental work. She soft scrambled eggs in butter until barely set and still glistening with moisture, then folded them into a rich cream sauce made from butter, flour, and warm milk, whisked until smooth. The eggs remained incredibly tender, with small curds suspended in velvety sauce. She served this over lightly toasted white bread that stayed soft rather than crispy, allowing the cream sauce to soak in and create fork-tender texture throughout. Each bite was smooth, rich, and required absolutely no chewing effort. The eggs practically dissolved on the tongue, and the sauce-soaked toast was tender enough to eat with just a spoon. This became the go-to meal for anyone needing gentle food, proving that simple eggs could be transformed into something remarkably soothing and easy to swallow for morning gatherings when someone needed extra care. Warm milk, toast with butter, was the gentlest food Grandma made when someone was truly unwell and needed something that would go down without any effort. She warmed whole milk in a saucepan with a tablespoon of sugar and a pinch of salt until steaming but not boiling. Meanwhile, she lightly toasted white bread until just warm and slightly firm, then placed it in shallow bowls. She poured the hot, sweetened milk generously over the toast, completely submerging it, then dotted the top with pats of butter that melted into golden pools. The toast absorbed the warm milk within seconds, becoming incredibly soft and spoonable, no knife or fork needed. Each spoonful was warm, milky, and soothing, with bread so tender it dissolved instantly and milk that was comforting and easy to swallow. This became the meal for upset stomachs, sore throats, or anyone too tired to chew, proving that the simplest combinations provided the most comfort when someone needed gentle nourishment and care. Tender corned beef and soft cabbage transformed March suppers into celebrations when Grandma started this early in the day for evening family gatherings. The beautiful thing about corned beef was that it came pre-seasoned from the butcher, so she simply placed the pink brisket in her largest pot, covered it with cold water, added the spice packet, and brought it to a gentle simmer. The critical mistake many cooks made was boiling it vigorously, which made the meat tough and stringy. Grandma knew to keep the water at the barest simmer, with just a few bubbles breaking the surface occasionally. After 2.5 hours of this patient simmering, the corned beef had transformed from firm brisket to something remarkably tender. She could pierce it easily with a fork, and the muscle fibers had relaxed enough that it would shred rather than slice. At this point, she added quartered potatoes and thick wedges of green cabbage directly to the cooking liquid, letting them simmer together for the final 30 minutes. The cabbage became incredibly soft, almost silky in texture, and both vegetables absorbed the wonderful spiced, salty flavors from the meat's cooking liquid. When serving time arrived, she removed the corned beef and let it rest briefly, before pulling it apart with 2 forks rather than slicing it. This created tender shreds that were far easier to eat than traditional slices. Each plate received a generous portion of shredded meat, several cabbage wedges that were soft enough to cut with a fork, and tender potatoes that practically melted. She ladled some of the cooking liquid over everything, keeping it all moist and flavorful for St. Patrick's Day suppers when friends and family gathered to celebrate together. Soft cheese soufflé brought French elegance to American tables when Grandma wanted something impressive yet remarkably tender for special luncheons with friends who gathered around her table. She made a thick cheese sauce from butter, flour, milk, and grated sharp cheddar, then folded in beaten egg yolks for richness and beautiful golden color. The magic happened when she whipped egg whites until stiff peaks formed. This required patience and a clean bowl with no trace of grease, then gently folded them into the cheese mixture using careful under and over motions that preserved the air bubbles, creating extraordinarily airy texture. This delicate mixture went into a buttered soufflé dish that had been dusted with grated Parmesan for extra flavor and to help the soufflé climb the sides, and it baked at 375 degrees for 30 minutes until puffed dramatically above the rim and golden brown on top, but still soft and slightly jiggly in the center. The timing was crucial. Overbaking would make it dry and tough, while underbaking left it too liquid inside. The finished soufflé was extraordinarily delicate and beautiful, It deflated slightly when removed from the oven, which was normal and expected, but revealed interior that was cloud-soft and almost custard-like, with gorgeous cheese flavor throughout. Each spoonful was airy, intensely cheesy, and melted instantly on the tongue, requiring absolutely no chewing whatsoever. The texture was somewhere between mousse and custard, and with lightness from the whipped egg whites and richness from the cheese and yolks. She served it immediately while still warm. Soufflés waited for no one, and family members appreciated how something so elegant could be so gentle and easy to eat. This proved that French classics could be adapted for those needing soft textures, bringing sophistication to special gatherings where everyone could participate comfortably. Creamed mushrooms on soft toast elevated simple ingredients into something elegant yet remarkably tender when Grandma wanted a light supper that felt special for Friday evenings with friends. She sliced fresh mushrooms paper-thin so they would cook quickly and become incredibly soft, then sautéed them gently in butter until they released all their moisture and became golden brown and tender, which took about 8 minutes over medium heat with patient stirring. To these soft mushrooms she added flour directly in the pan, stirring to coat them, and create a roux, then gradually poured in heavy cream and milk, while whisking constantly to prevent lumps from forming. The mixture thickened into gorgeous pale tan sauce, studded with tender mushroom slices, with rich, earthy flavor throughout. She seasoned it with salt, white pepper, and sometimes a splash of sherry that added depth without acidity. The toast required special attention for those needing soft food. She lightly toasted white bread, just enough to be warm, but not crispy, keeping it tender so it would soften further when the hot cream sauce was spooned over it. She placed the toast on plates and ladled the creamed mushrooms generously over each slice, on making sure plenty of sauce soaked into the bread. Within a minute, the toast absorbed the cream and became fork-tender throughout, creating texture that was soft enough to eat with just a spoon. Each bite combined tender mushrooms, rich cream sauce, and soft toast that required minimal chewing effort. She sometimes garnished with fresh parsley for color, proving that elegant meals could be gentle and accessible for everyone gathered around her table, showing that simple preparations could deliver sophisticated flavors without requiring anyone to struggle with tough textures during Friday evening gatherings. These 25 tender dinners showcased different cooking methods, braising, simmering, gentle cooking, that transformed ordinary ingredients into melt-in-your-mouth meals. Warm milk, toast with cinnamon sugar, was the gentlest food Grandma made when someone was truly unwell and needed something that would go down without any effort whatsoever. She warmed whole milk in a saucepan with a tablespoon of sugar and a pinch of salt until steaming but not boiling, stirring occasionally to prevent a skin from forming on the surface. Meanwhile, she lightly toasted white bread until just warm and slightly firm, not crispy or brown, then placed each slice in a shallow soup bowl where it could absorb liquid without falling apart. She poured the hot sweetened milk generously over the toast, completely submerging it and allowing it to soak for 30 seconds, then dotted the top with pats of butter that melted into golden pools across the surface. A light sprinkle of cinnamon sugar added gentle sweetness and warm spice that made it feel special rather than medicinal. The toast absorbed the warm milk within seconds, becoming incredibly soft and spoonable, no knife or fork needed whatsoever. Each spoonful was warm, milky, and extraordinarily soothing, with bread so tender it dissolved instantly on the tongue and milk that was comforting and easy to swallow without any effort. The cinnamon added nostalgic flavor that reminded people of happier times, and the butter provided richness that made it feel nourishing rather than bland. This became the meal for upset stomachs, sore throats, post-surgery recovery, or anyone too tired or unwell to chew anything requiring effort. She served it in pretty china bowls despite its simplicity, making even this gentle invalid food feel cared for and special. This proved that the simplest combinations, bread, milk, butter, and a touch of sweetness, provided the most comfort when someone needed gentle nourishment, care, and the reminder that they were loved enough to receive food prepared with patience and attention. Soft polenta with butter and cheese brought Italian comfort to tables when Grandma wanted something that was both nourishing and remarkably smooth for evening suppers with family. Polenta was simply cornmeal cooked in liquid until it became creamy and porridge-like, with texture that required absolutely no chewing when prepared properly with patience and enough liquid. She brought chicken broth or milk to a gentle boil in a heavy saucepan, and then whisked in fine cornmeal gradually while stirring constantly to prevent lumps from forming. The key to achieving that remarkably smooth, creamy texture was constant stirring and low heat. She reduced the temperature to the barest simmer and stirred patiently for 15 to 20 minutes as the cornmeal absorbed the liquid and swelled into thick, golden porridge. If it became too thick, she added more warm liquid gradually until it reached the consistency of soft mashed potatoes or thick cream. When the polenta was cooked until completely tender with no gritty texture remaining, she stirred in generous amounts of butter and grated Parmesan cheese, beating vigorously until they melted completely into the polenta and created glossy, rich texture. Some grandmas added a splash of heavy cream for extra smoothness and richness. She served it immediately, while still hot and fluid, ladling generous portions into bowls where it pooled and spread like thick cream. Each spoonful was smooth, buttery, and intensely comforting, with mild corn flavor enhanced by the cheese and butter. The texture was so soft it could be eaten with just a spoon, requiring no chewing whatsoever. Yet it was substantial enough to feel satisfying rather than insubstantial. This became a favorite comfort food that proved simple cornmeal could be transformed into something elegant and gentle for gatherings around her table. Cream of wheat in savory form became an unexpected dinner solution when Grandma needed something that cooked quickly, yet was remarkably tender for weeknight suppers when time was short. Most people knew cream of wheat as sweet breakfast cereal, but the savory version with cheese and butter was equally delicious and far more substantial, making it suitable as a light dinner or side dish that was entirely soft and gentle. She brought chicken broth or milk to a boil in a medium saucepan, then whisked in cream of wheat gradually, while stirring constantly to prevent lumps from forming in the smooth mixture. The wheat cereal cooked quickly, just 2 to 3 minutes, swelling and thickening into creamy porridge that was pale ivory in color with gorgeous smooth texture. Unlike oatmeal, which retained some texture, properly cooked cream of wheat was completely smooth and silky. When it reached the right consistency, thick enough to mound on a spoon but still fluid and creamy, she stirred in butter, grated cheese, salt, and pepper, beating until the cheese melted completely and created rich, savory flavor throughout. Some grandmas added a pinch of garlic powder or dried herbs for additional flavor depth. She served it immediately in bowls, while still hot and fluid, and each spoonful was smooth, creamy, and required no chewing effort whatsoever. The cheese added protein and richness, making it substantial enough to serve as a light meal rather than just a breakfast cereal. This proved that hot cereals could be adapted for savory meals when prepared thoughtfully, providing gentle nutrition in minutes for busy weeknight gatherings when the family needed something quick but nourishing that everyone could eat comfortably without any struggle. Slow-cooked beef stew became Saturday's project when Grandma started early in the day, knowing the long cooking time would transform tough beef into something extraordinary for evening suppers with family. She chose chuck roast specifically because it had enough connective tissue and marbling that long, slow cooking would break it down into incredible tenderness rather than drying it out. After cutting it into 1-inch cubes, not too large, she took the crucial step of browning each piece well on all sides, developing deep color and flavor that would enrich the entire stew. The magic happened in her heavy Dutch oven, where the browned beef went along with beef broth, red wine for depth, tomato paste for richness, and aromatics. She brought it to a simmer on the stovetop, and then covered it tightly and moved it to a 300-degree oven for 2 full hours. This gentle, even heat transformed the beef remarkably. The connective tissue melted into gelatin, the muscle fibers relaxed and became tender, and each chunk developed the ability to fall apart at the slightest pressure. After 2 hours, she added potatoes and carrots cut into large chunks and returned it to the oven for another hour until the vegetables were fork-tender and nearly falling apart themselves. The resulting stew was magnificent. The beef chunks could be cut with a spoon, the vegetables were completely soft, and the cooking liquid had reduced and thickened into a rich brown gravy. She ladled generous portions into wide bowls, making sure each serving had plenty of that gorgeous gravy, and served it to family members who appreciated how something that started tough had become so tender through patient, loving preparation for Saturday evening gatherings around her table. Cream of mushroom soup with chicken transformed ordinary canned soup into an elegant, nourishing meal when Grandma needed something quick but substantial for Thursday suppers with neighbors. She started with the canned cream of mushroom soup as a base, which was already smooth and creamy, but elevated it significantly. First, she sautéed fresh mushrooms sliced paper-thin in butter until they were completely soft and golden, releasing all their earthy flavor and moisture into the pan, which took patience but created wonderful depth. To this, she added the canned soup along with equal parts chicken broth and heavy cream, whisking everything together until smooth and silky. The broth thinned it to proper soup consistency rather than thick sauce, while the cream added luxurious richness and beautiful ivory color. She added finely shredded cooked chicken, using 2 forks to create the finest possible shreds that were almost thread-like, ensuring no large chunks would require chewing. Everything simmered together gently for 15 minutes, allowing the flavors to meld beautifully and the soup to thicken slightly. The finished soup was remarkably smooth and creamy, with delicate chicken shreds and soft mushroom slices suspended throughout. She served it in pretty bowls with a swirl of additional cream on top for visual appeal, and many family members appreciated how substantial it felt despite being completely smooth and gentle. The mushroom flavor was earthy and comforting, the chicken added protein without any chewing challenge, and the cream made everything rich and satisfying. This proved that soup could be a complete meal rather than just a starter, especially when prepared thoughtfully for those needing soft, nourishing food at Thursday evening gatherings when friends dropped by unexpectedly for supper and conversation. These 30 meals prove Grandma's mastered every technique for creating tender dinners, braising, slow cooking, gentle simmering, that brought families together comfortably. From casseroles to soups, each method transformed ingredients into melt-in-your-mouth comfort, patient preparation, loving cooking, and tables filled with satisfied diners. Let's discover 10 more techniques using different approaches entirely. Soft chicken noodle soup became the remedy for everything. Colds, bad days, or simply needing comfort on rainy evenings when the family gathered inside. What set Grandma's version apart was her attention to texture for those who needed genuinely soft food rather than typical soup. She started by simmering chicken pieces in well-seasoned broth with onions, celery, and carrots until the chicken was falling off the bone tender, which took a full 30 minutes of gentle bubbling that filled the house with wonderful aroma. After removing the chicken and shredding it into the finest possible pieces while discarding all bones and cartilage, she strained the broth to remove the cooked vegetables, which had given their flavor, and added fresh vegetables cut into tiny dice so they would cook soft quickly. The crucial difference came with the noodles. Instead of adding them for the typical 7 to 8 minutes, she let them cook for a full 15 minutes until they were genuinely soft throughout, with no firmness remaining, creating noodles that were tender enough to need almost no chewing. She returned the shredded chicken to the pot, adjusted the seasonings, and served it steaming hot in deep bowls. Each spoonful had soft noodles, tiny tender vegetable pieces, delicate chicken shreds, and rich golden broth that tied everything together. The soup was substantial enough to serve as a complete meal, yet gentle enough that it slid down easily for anyone with swallowing difficulties. This became the go-to meal for comfort, healing, and gathering the family around the table when someone needed extra care and tenderness in both food and spirit. Tender beef and barley soup required time but minimal attention, making it perfect for Saturday afternoons when Grandma could let it simmer while doing other tasks before evening supper. She started with beef chuck cut into half-inch cubes, smaller than typical stew meat, which would become tender faster and be easier to eat in soup form. These got browned well in her soup pot, developing deep color that would flavor the entire broth. Then she added beef stock, water, and pearl barley that had been rinsed thoroughly. The key to this soup's remarkable tenderness was the long, gentle simmer. She kept it at the barest bubble for 90 minutes, during which time the beef transformed from chewy to fall-apart tender, and the barley cooked until each grain was plump, soft, and had released enough starch to thicken the soup naturally into something hearty and substantial. Midway through, she added carrots, celery, and onions, all diced quite small, so they would cook completely soft rather than retaining any crisp texture. The finished soup was deeply brown and incredibly thick, almost more like a thin stew than a brothy soup. Each bowl was packed with tender beef pieces that fell apart at the slightest pressure, soft barley grains that had absorbed all the rich beef flavor, and vegetables that were cooked until they practically melted. She served it with soft white bread for dipping, and the combination made a complete satisfying meal that was gentle enough for anyone needing soft food, but hearty enough to satisfy hungry family members who had worked hard all day before gathering around her welcoming table. Egg drop soup brought Chinese-inspired comfort to tables when Grandma wanted something warm, nourishing, and extraordinarily gentle for family members who needed soft food. This soup was essentially seasoned broth with delicate egg ribbons swirled throughout, creating texture that was soft as silk and required absolutely no chewing effort. She brought chicken broth to a gentle simmer in a saucepan, seasoning it with salt, white pepper, and sometimes a splash of soy sauce for depth. The magic happened when she beat eggs thoroughly in a small bowl, then drizzled them slowly into the simmering broth while stirring gently with chopsticks or a fork, creating delicate egg ribbons that cooked instantly and floated throughout the clear golden broth. The key was maintaining gentle heat. If the broth boiled too vigorously, the eggs would form tough clumps instead of tender ribbons. She added cornstarch mixed with cold water to thicken the soup slightly, creating body that made it more substantial than plain broth, and sometimes stirred in finely chopped green onions for mild flavor and color. The finished soup was clear and golden, with beautiful egg ribbons suspended throughout. Each spoonful was warm, savory, and incredibly smooth, with egg ribbons so delicate they dissolved instantly on the tongue. The soup was nourishing yet light, perfect for upset stomachs or anyone recovering from illness who needed gentle protein. She served it in small bowls as a starter or larger portions as a light meal, proving that Asian-inspired dishes could be adapted for soft food needs, bringing variety and interest to gentle meals for evening gatherings when someone needed extra care and comfort around her kitchen table. Rich tomato soup with soft grilled cheese became the ultimate comfort combination when Grandma wanted something simple but deeply satisfying for Friday lunch when grandchildren visited. Her tomato soup wasn't from a can. She made it from scratch, using canned tomatoes that she simmered with butter, onions, and a touch of sugar to balance the acidity. Then blended until completely smooth, using her immersion blender right in the pot. This created a soup that was velvety and thick, with beautiful red-orange color and no seeds or chunks to interrupt the silky texture. The addition of heavy cream transformed it from simple tomato soup into something luxurious. She swirled it in just before serving, creating beautiful marbling before stirring it fully to create that classic pink-orange color and incredibly rich taste. The soup was smooth enough to drink from a mug, yet substantial enough to feel like a meal rather than just a starter course. The grilled cheese sandwich required special attention for those needing soft food. She used the softest white bread available, buttered it generously on the outside, and filled it with American cheese that melted beautifully. The key was cooking it slowly over medium-low heat, rather than high heat, ensuring the bread toasted gently to golden color while staying relatively soft rather than becoming hard and crispy. She cut the sandwich into small squares rather than halves, making them perfect for dunking into the soup where they absorbed the tomato richness. Each bite combined warm, creamy soup with soft bread and melted cheese, creating the ultimate comfort food pairing that was gentle enough for anyone with chewing difficulties, yet satisfying enough for hungry family members gathering around her kitchen table on casual Friday afternoons. Cloud soft cream of chicken soup elevated the humble canned soup concept by starting completely from scratch, giving Grandma control over texture and flavor for Monday suppers. She poached chicken breasts in seasoned chicken broth with aromatics until remarkably tender, then removed them and shredded the meat into the finest possible strands, so delicate they were almost thread-like and required no chewing whatsoever. Meanwhile, she built a rich cream sauce in a separate pan by making a blonde roux from butter and flour, then gradually whisking in some of the chicken cooking liquid and heavy cream until it was thick, smooth, and ivory-colored. The key to the soup's remarkable texture was straining. She strained the chicken broth to remove all the aromatics and any particles, creating a perfectly clear base. Then she combined this strained broth with the cream sauce, whisking until completely smooth and unified. The finely shredded chicken went back in, along with tiny diced vegetables that had been cooked separately until completely soft. Everything simmered together gently for just 10 minutes to meld the flavors. The finished soup was extraordinarily smooth and creamy, almost like drinking warm silk, with delicate chicken shreds and tender vegetable pieces suspended throughout. Each spoonful was rich and comforting, coating the mouth with velvety cream while delivering gentle chicken flavor and warmth. She served it in pretty china bowls with a small pat of butter melting on top, making even a simple Monday supper feel special when the family gathered after the weekend, proving that homemade always tasted better than anything from a can. These 35 meals showcase how different ingredients, from beef to vegetables to simple potatoes, all became tender through patient cooking techniques. Each soup and stew brought comfort to tables where families gathered, sharing warmth and nourishment. Smooth textures, rich flavors, and meals everyone could enjoy together. Let's discover 5 more comforting dishes. Buttery oyster stew represented elegance and coastal tradition when Grandma served it for Christmas Eve suppers following family custom. Oysters were naturally tender, requiring no chewing effort whatsoever, which made them ideal for those needing soft food, though their delicate flavor and luxurious reputation made them feel special rather than medicinal. She started with fresh shucked oysters in their liquor, which she poured into a saucepan and heated gently with butter, never letting it come to a full boil because high heat would toughen the oysters instantly. The cooking process was remarkably quick. The oysters just needed to heat through until their edges curled slightly, which took only 3 to 4 minutes. Overcooking was the enemy here, transforming delicate oysters into rubbery disappointments. While they heated, she warmed whole milk and heavy cream in a separate pan, then combined everything together, creating a beautiful ivory stew with plump gray oysters floating throughout. Seasonings were minimal, just salt, white pepper, and sometimes a tiny pinch of cayenne for warmth, because the oyster's natural briny sweetness was the star. She ladled the stew into heated bowls and topped each with a generous pat of butter that melted into golden pools on the surface, adding richness and sheen. Some family members added oyster crackers for texture, but the stew itself was smooth, creamy, and remarkably delicate. The oysters were so tender they practically dissolved on the tongue, and the cream carried their ocean-sweet flavor beautifully. This Christmas Eve tradition brought the family together around her table, sharing a meal that was both elegant and gentle enough for elderly grandparents to enjoy comfortably during holiday celebrations. Soft grits with butter and cheese brought Southern comfort to tables when Grandma wanted something creamy, filling, and remarkably smooth for family suppers that needed simple but satisfying food. Grits were ground corn cooked in liquid until they became smooth and porridge-like, with texture similar to polenta, but even softer and creamier when prepared with enough liquid and patience. She brought water or chicken broth to a rolling boil in a heavy saucepan, then whisked in white grits gradually while stirring constantly to prevent lumps. The key to achieving that signature creamy texture was reducing the heat to low and stirring frequently, not constantly, for 12 to 15 minutes as the grits absorbed the liquid and swelled into thick, creamy porridge. She added more warm liquid if they became too thick, keeping them fluid and smooth rather than stiff. The grits were done when they had no gritty texture remaining and tasted smooth and tender throughout. When fully cooked, she stirred in generous amounts of butter and sharp cheddar cheese, beating vigorously until they melted completely and created glossy, rich mixture with beautiful pale yellow color. Some Southern grandmas added a splash of heavy cream for extra smoothness. She served generous portions while still hot, and each spoonful was smooth, buttery, and intensely comforting with mild corn flavor enhanced by cheese. The texture was so soft and creamy it could be eaten with just a spoon, requiring absolutely no chewing, yet substantial enough to serve as a complete meal when paired with soft vegetables. This became a staple comfort food, proving simple ingredients could create remarkable satisfaction for gatherings where everyone needed gentle, nourishing food around her welcoming table. Velvety cream of celery soup showcased a humble vegetable that often played supporting role, giving it center stage for Tuesday suppers when Grandma wanted something different yet comforting. She chopped celery, both the pale inner stalks and the flavorful leaves, quite fine, then sautéed it gently in butter with diced onions until both were completely soft and tender without any crunch remaining, which took patience but developed wonderful flavor. The celery's natural moisture released during this process, creating the base of flavor that would permeate the entire soup. To this soft vegetable base, she added chicken broth and let everything simmer together for 20 minutes, further softening the vegetables and allowing flavors to meld beautifully. And then came the crucial step for achieving that remarkable smoothness. She used her immersion blender right in the pot, pureeing everything until completely smooth and pale green with no vegetable pieces remaining. This created a naturally thick soup from the pureed vegetables themselves, though she added a roux made from butter and flour for extra body and richness. Heavy cream stirred in at the end transformed it from simple vegetable soup into something luxurious and velvety, turning the color to pale sage green and adding richness that balanced the celery's slightly bitter, herbal notes. She seasoned it simply with salt, white pepper, and a pinch of nutmeg that complemented the celery beautifully. Each spoonful was remarkably smooth and creamy, with delicate celery flavor that was comforting without being heavy. This proved that elegant, satisfying soup could come from the simplest vegetables when prepared thoughtfully for family suppers needing gentle, nourishing food. Tender chicken and rice soup became Wednesday's answer when Grandma wanted something more substantial than broth-based soup, but gentler than thick stew. She started by simmering chicken pieces in well-seasoned broth with aromatics until the meat was fall-apart tender, then removed and shredded it finely while straining the broth to create a clear, golden base. The rice went into this simmering broth. She used long-grain white rice and cooked it much longer than typical rice preparation, letting it simmer for 30 minutes until the grains were plump, tender, and had begun to break down slightly, releasing their starch to thicken the soup naturally. On this extended cooking transformed the rice from separate grains into something softer and more porridge-like, which was exactly what she wanted for those needing gentle food. She added the shredded chicken back in, along with small diced carrots and celery that had been cooked separately until completely soft, ensuring no crisp vegetables would interrupt the tender texture. The soup continued simmering gently for another 15 minutes, allowing everything to come together. The finished soup was thick and hearty, almost more like a thin risotto than typical soup, with rice grains that were tender enough to need no chewing, and chicken so delicate it fell apart at the slightest pressure. She adjusted seasoning with salt, pepper, and fresh herbs like parsley or dill that added brightness without harshness. Each bowl was nourishing and comforting, providing complete nutrition in a form that was easy to eat for anyone with chewing difficulties, yet satisfying enough for hungry family members gathering for midweek suppers after busy days. Melt-in-your-mouth beef and vegetable soup required an afternoon's patience, but rewarded with incredibly tender results, perfect for Saturday evening suppers with extended family. Grandma started with beef chuck roast that she cut into 3/4-inch cubes, then browned in batches to develop deep color on all sides. This step was crucial for flavor development that would carry through the entire soup. The browned meat went into her largest soup pot with beef broth, water, and aromatics, then simmered gently for 2 full hours until the beef was so tender it could be shredded with a spoon. This long cooking time was the secret to transforming potentially tough beef into something extraordinarily tender. The connective tissue melted into gelatin, enriching the broth and making it slightly viscous, while the muscle fibers relaxed completely and became fall-apart tender. After 2 hours, she added potatoes, carrots, celery, and onions, all cut into uniform small pieces, then continued simmering for another 30 minutes. These 40 tender dinners prove Grandma's mastered every cooking method: braising, simmering, pureeing, slow cooking, transforming ingredients into melt-in-your-mouth comfort. From oyster stew to beef soup, each technique brought families together around tables filled with warmth. Which of these did your grandmother make for your family gatherings? Smooth navy bean soup became Saturday's project when Grandma started early in the morning, knowing the dried beans required hours of patient simmering to transform from hard pebbles into creamy, melt-in-your-mouth tenderness. She began by sorting through the dried navy beans spread on a clean towel, removing any debris or misshapen beans, then rinsing them thoroughly under cold running water. The crucial first step was soaking. She covered the beans with water and let them sit overnight, or if time was short, she used the quick soak method by bringing them to a boil for 2 minutes, then letting them rest for an hour before cooking. The long cooking process was essential for achieving that remarkable tenderness everyone loved. She placed the soaked, drained beans in her largest soup pot with fresh water, a ham bone or ham hock for flavor, diced onions, carrots, celery, and bay leaves. Bringing everything to a gentle simmer, she maintained this low, steady heat for 2.5 to 3 hours, checking occasionally and adding water if needed to keep the beans covered. The beans gradually softened, their skins becoming tender, and the interiors turning creamy and smooth as they absorbed the smoky ham flavor from the bone. About halfway through cooking, she added salt. Adding it earlier would toughen the bean skins and prevent proper softening. As the beans continued cooking, they began breaking down naturally, releasing their starch into the liquid and thickening the soup without any added flour. Some beans dissolved completely, creating a thick, creamy base, while others remained whole but were so tender they practically melted on the tongue. She removed the ham bone, picked off any meat, diced it small, and returned it to the pot. The finished soup was thick, creamy, and pale ivory in color, with a gorgeous sheen from the bean starch. Each spoonful was smooth and substantial, with beans that required no chewing effort. They simply dissolved in your mouth. She served it in deep bowls with cornbread on the side, and the combination provided complete protein nutrition in a form that was incredibly gentle for anyone with chewing difficulties. This Saturday tradition filled the house with wonderful aroma all afternoon and brought the family together for evening supper around her welcoming table, proving that patience and time created the most tender, comforting results. Creamy clam chowder brought coastal flavor to Midwestern tables when Grandma served this for Friday suppers, honoring the Catholic tradition of meatless meals with something substantially satisfying. She started with canned minced clams because they were already tender and required no additional cooking that might toughen them. Fresh clams needed careful timing, but canned ones were reliably soft every time. She drained the clams and reserved their precious liquor, which would become the flavor base for the entire chowder. In her heavy soup pot, she cooked diced bacon until crispy, then removed it and used the rendered fat to sauté finely diced onions and celery until they were completely soft and translucent. No crunch remained. She sprinkled flour over these vegetables, stirring to create a roux that would thicken the chowder naturally. Gradually, she whisked in the reserved clam liquor along with chicken or fish stock, stirring constantly to prevent lumps from forming, creating a smooth base that would carry all the flavors. Potatoes cut into small dice went in next, simmering in this flavorful liquid until they were fork tender and beginning to fall apart at the edges, which took about 15 minutes of gentle bubbling. These potato pieces would help thicken the chowder further as they broke down slightly. Then came the dairy. She added whole milk and heavy cream, warming everything together gently without boiling, which would have caused curdling. The reserved minced clams went in at the very end, heating through for just 2 minutes since they were already cooked and needed only warming. The finished chowder was thick, creamy, and pale ivory with flecks of clam throughout. She seasoned it simply with salt, white pepper, and a tiny pinch of thyme, allowing the sweet clam flavor to shine. Each bowl got topped with the reserved crispy bacon crumbles for those who could handle texture, though the chowder itself was smooth and gentle. The clams were so tender they required no chewing, the potatoes were completely soft, and the cream made everything rich and satisfying. She served it with oyster crackers on the side, and the combination made a complete meal that brought the family together for Friday evening suppers, sharing stories while enjoying this coastal classic that proved simple ingredients. Rich cream of tomato soup became lunch perfection when Grandma wanted something elegant yet comforting for Tuesday afternoons when friends dropped by for tea and conversation. Unlike the soup from cans, her homemade version was remarkably smooth, rich, and had depth of flavor that came from proper cooking technique and quality ingredients. She started with canned whole tomatoes because they were consistent year-round, though in summer she used fresh tomatoes that she peeled and seeded first to ensure the smoothest possible texture without any bitter seeds or tough skins interrupting the silky consistency. The cooking process began with sautéing finely diced onions in butter until they were completely soft and translucent, releasing their natural sweetness without developing any brown color that would darken the soup's beautiful red-orange hue. She added the tomatoes, breaking them up with a wooden spoon, along with chicken broth for body, a tablespoon of sugar to balance the tomatoes' natural acidity, and a pinch of baking soda that neutralized acids and prevented curdling when cream was added later. Everything simmered together gently for 20 minutes, allowing flavors to meld and the tomatoes to break down completely. The crucial step for achieving that velvety smoothness was blending. She used her immersion blender right in the pot, pureeing everything until completely smooth with no chunks or seeds remaining, creating gorgeous red-orange liquid that was thick and silky. She strained it through a fine mesh sieve to remove any remaining solids, and ensuring perfect smoothness that would coat the back of a spoon. Then came the cream. She stirred in heavy cream off the heat, warming it gently, watching as the soup transformed from bright red to beautiful coral pink color. Soft minestrone underwent special adaptation when Grandma wanted to serve this Italian classic to family members who needed extra tender vegetables for Wednesday evening suppers. Traditional minestrone celebrated crisp, tender vegetables, but her version cooked everything until remarkably soft while maintaining wonderful flavor. She started with a flavorful base by sautéing finely diced onions, carrots, and celery in olive oil until they were completely soft and beginning to caramelize, releasing natural sweetness and creating deep flavor foundation. To this, she added canned crushed tomatoes for body and color, chicken or vegetable broth for liquid, and a Parmesan rind that would simmer with the soup, releasing wonderful umami richness into the broth. She brought everything to a gentle simmer and let it cook for 20 minutes, allowing the flavors to develop and meld together beautifully. Then came the vegetables. She added green beans cut into tiny pieces, diced zucchini, small pasta shapes like ditalini or small shells, and canned white beans that were already tender. The key was cooking these additions much longer than typical minestrone. She simmered everything for an additional 25 minutes until the pasta was exceptionally soft, The green beans had no crunch whatsoever, and the zucchini was beginning to fall apart. The result was minestrone that maintained its characteristic appearance, colorful vegetables, elevated simple frozen vegetables into something luxurious when Grandma needed a gentle side dish for Thursday evening suppers with neighbors. Most people simply boiled these vegetables and served them plain, but her creamed version transformed them into something remarkably smooth and rich that was far easier to eat for those with chewing difficulties. She started with frozen peas and carrots. The tiny baby varieties were best because they were naturally more tender, and cooked them in boiling water until they were completely soft. I well passed the typical crisp tender stage that most recipes recommended. After draining them thoroughly to remove all excess water that would thin the cream sauce, she transferred them to her food processor and pulsed several times until they were roughly mashed but not completely pureed. She wanted some texture remaining for visual interest and to prove these were real vegetables rather than baby food, but ensured no large hard pieces remained that would require significant chewing. Meanwhile, she made a rich cream sauce by melting butter in a saucepan, whisking in flour to create a blonde roux, then gradually adding warm milk while stirring constantly until it thickened into smooth ivory sauce. The mashed vegetables went into this cream sauce, and she stirred everything together gently over low heat, allowing the vegetables to warm through and absorb the creamy richness. She seasoned simply with salt, white pepper, and sometimes a pinch of sugar that enhanced the vegetables' natural sweetness without making them taste dessert-like. The finished dish was pale orange-green, creamy, and remarkably smooth, with vegetables that were tender enough to eat with a spoon, yet still recognizable as peas and carrots rather than puree. She served generous spoonfuls alongside main dishes like meatloaf or pot roast, and family members appreciated how the cream sauce helped the vegetables slide down easily, making them pleasant to eat rather than a struggle. This proved that even simple vegetables could be prepared thoughtfully for those needing softer textures, and the butter and cream transformed them from boring obligation into something people actually looked forward to eating, bringing smiles to Thursday evening suppers when friends gathered around her welcoming table, sharing meals and good conversation. These 45 tender dinners prove every cooking method creates melt-in-your-mouth comfort, from soaking beans overnight to gentle simmering, careful blending to patient braising. Each technique brought families together around tables where everyone could enjoy meals comfortably. Simple ingredients, thoughtful preparation, and love in every spoonful. Let's discover 15 more gentle classics. Cloud-soft mashed potatoes with rich gravy became the foundation of countless comfort meals when Grandma served them as both side dish and canvas for flavorful gravies. The secret to extraordinary tenderness wasn't just mashing. It started with potato selection and cooking method. She chose russet potatoes specifically because their high starch content created fluffy, light texture rather than the gluey consistency that waxy potatoes produced. After peeling and cutting them into uniform chunks, she placed them in cold, salted water and brought it to a gentle boil, cooking until the potatoes were so tender they fell apart when pierced with a fork. The crucial moment came after draining. She returned the pot to the warm burner for 30 seconds, allowing residual moisture to evaporate, which prevented watery mashed potatoes. Then began the mashing process, and here technique mattered enormously. She used a potato ricer or food mill when available, which created the smoothest, lightest texture possible by pressing the potatoes through small holes rather than smashing them. Or she used a traditional masher with patience and care, never using an electric mixer which would overwork the starches and create gluey paste. While mashing, she added warm milk, Cold milk would cool the potatoes and prevent proper absorption, and generous amounts of butter, incorporating them gradually until the potatoes were cloud-like, smooth as silk, and had no lumps whatsoever. The consistency should be soft enough to drop from a spoon, but thick enough to hold a gentle peak. She kept them warm over a pan of simmering water while preparing gravy from pan drippings, beef or chicken broth, and flour whisked until smooth and rich brown, with perfect thickness that coated the back of a spoon. Serving was an art. She created a well in the center of each mound of mashed potatoes, then ladled gravy generously into this depression, letting it pool and flow over the edges. Each forkful combined fluffy, butter-rich potatoes with savory gravy, creating comfort that required absolutely no chewing effort. The potatoes practically dissolved on the tongue, and the gravy added moisture and flavor that made swallowing effortless. This became the most requested side dish at family gatherings because it was universally beloved by all ages, from toddlers just learning to eat to elderly relatives needing the gentlest food, proving that simple ingredients prepared with care and attention created the most satisfying results. Tender-baked fish with lemon butter provided gentle protein when Grandma wanted something light yet nourishing for Friday evening suppers following meatless traditions. Fish was naturally tender when properly cooked, making it ideal for those needing soft food, though the challenge was preventing overcooking that would make it dry and difficult to swallow. She chose mild white fish like cod, haddock, or sole. These had delicate flavor that appealed to most family members and flaked easily when cooked, requiring no cutting with a knife. Her preparation method ensured moistness and tenderness every time. She placed the fish fillets in a buttered baking dish, seasoned them simply with salt and white pepper, then dotted generous amounts of butter across the top of each piece. She added a splash of white wine or chicken broth to the bottom of the dish, just enough liquid to create steam during baking, which kept the fish moist and prevented it from drying out. A squeeze of fresh lemon juice went over everything, adding bright flavor without harshness. She covered the dish tightly with aluminum foil, creating a sealed environment that would steam cook the fish gently. The baking time was crucial. She cooked it at 375 degrees for just 12 to 15 minutes, depending on the thickness of the fillets. The fish was done when it turned opaque throughout and flaked easily when touched with a fork, but retained moisture and tenderness. Overcooking, even by a few minutes, would turn it dry and tough, so she watched carefully. When ready, the fish was snow-white, incredibly flaky, and moist from the butter and steam. She served each fillet with a generous drizzle of the buttery pan juices that had collected in the baking dish, sometimes whisking in additional fresh lemon juice and chopped parsley to create a simple sauce. The fish was so tender it fell apart at the slightest fork pressure, practically melting on the tongue with delicate flavor enhanced by butter and lemon. She paired it with mashed potatoes and creamed vegetables, creating a complete meal that was entirely soft and gentle, yet substantial enough to satisfy hungry family members gathering for Friday evening suppers, proving that tender food could still be elegant and delicious. Moist salmon loaf became Saturday lunch perfection when Grandma wanted something that felt substantial but was remarkably tender for family gatherings. Using canned salmon made this economical and ensured consistent tenderness. Fresh salmon could be wonderful, but required more careful cooking to prevent dryness. She drained the canned salmon thoroughly, removed any visible bones and skin, though these were edible and soft, then flaked the fish into the finest possible pieces using a fork, creating delicate shreds rather than chunks. She used plenty of breadcrumbs that had been soaked in milk until completely soft and saturated. This mixture went into a greased loaf pan, and she pressed it down firmly when sliced. The salmon loaf slice was moist enough to eat without any sauce. The Silky egg noodles, tossed in butter, became the versatile side dish. She brought a large pot of salted water to a rolling boil. Plenty of water was essential so the noodles could move freely and cook evenly without sticking together in clumps. She added wide egg noodles and cooked them longer than the package directions suggested, typically 12 to 14 minutes instead of the recommended 7 to 8. Stirring occasionally to prevent sticking. This extended cooking time transformed the noodles from al dente, which had too much firmness, into genuinely soft throughout, with texture that required minimal chewing and was easy to swallow. After draining them thoroughly in a colander and giving them a gentle shake to remove excess water, she returned them to the warm pot and immediately tossed them with generous amounts of butter, at least 4 tablespoons for a pound of noodles, that melted instantly from the heat of the pasta, coating every strand in glossy richness. She sometimes added a splash of the pasta cooking water to create a light sauce that helped the butter distribute evenly. Seasonings were simple: salt, freshly ground black pepper, and sometimes chopped fresh parsley for color and mild herb flavor. Finished noodles were beautiful, golden yellow from the eggs and butter, glistening with richness, and remarkably tender. She served them as a bed for pot roast with gravy, alongside chicken fricassee, or simply as a side dish with butter and grated Parmesan cheese. Each forkful was silky smooth, rich from the butter, and required almost no chewing effort, making them perfect for elderly relatives, young children, and anyone needing soft food, while still being satisfying and delicious enough that everyone at the table appreciated them for weeknight suppers when the family gathered after busy days. Velvety creamed spinach transformed a vegetable many people disliked into something luxurious and remarkably smooth when Grandma served it at holiday dinners alongside roast turkey or beef. The secret was removing spinach's natural toughness and bitterness through proper cooking and enriching it with cream until it became silky and rich. She used frozen chopped spinach because it was consistently tender and already cut into small pieces, though fresh spinach worked beautifully when she had time to wash, stem, and chop it finely. The cooking process began by thawing the frozen spinach completely, then squeezing out every bit of excess moisture by pressing it in a clean kitchen towel. This step was crucial because any remaining water would make the creamed spinach thin and watery rather than thick and rich. Meanwhile, she made a rich cream sauce by sautéing finely minced shallots or onions in butter until completely soft and translucent, then whisking in flour to create a blonde roux that would thicken without adding color. Heavy cream went in gradually while she stirred constantly, cooking until the sauce was thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. The well-drained spinach went into this cream sauce, and she stirred everything together over gentle heat, allowing the spinach to warm through and absorb the creamy richness. She added seasonings thoughtfully: salt, white pepper to avoid black specks, and, importantly, a pinch of nutmeg that complemented spinach's earthy flavor beautifully without overwhelming it. Some grandmas added a bit of grated Parmesan cheese for extra richness and subtle umami depth. The finished creamed spinach was dark green from the spinach, enriched to pale sage where cream mixed in, and remarkably smooth with velvety texture. There were no tough spinach stems, no stringy pieces, no bitter aftertaste, just rich, creamy, a tender vegetable that even spinach skeptics found acceptable. These 50 tender dinners showcase every technique for creating melt-in-your-mouth comfort, from patient simmering to careful baking, thoughtful seasoning to proper timing. Each method brought families together around tables where everyone could enjoy meals without struggle. Loving preparation, gentle textures, and satisfaction in every bite. Let's discover 10 final comforting classics. Fluffy scrambled eggs with melted cheese became the go-to breakfast or light supper when Grandma needed something gentle, nourishing, and quick to prepare for unexpected gatherings or when someone wasn't feeling well. Eggs were naturally tender when properly cooked, making them ideal for those needing soft food, though the challenge was preventing overcooking that would create rubbery texture. Her method ensured extraordinary fluffiness and tenderness every single time without fail. She started by cracking eggs into a bowl. She used 2 eggs per person for proper portions, and whisked them thoroughly with a splash of milk or cream, which added moisture and helped create lighter texture. The key ratio was 1 tablespoon of dairy per 2 eggs, enough to make them fluffy without making them watery. She whisked vigorously until the mixture was uniformly yellow, with no streaks of white remaining, incorporating air that would contribute to fluffiness during cooking. Her cooking technique made all the difference. She heated a non-stick skillet over medium-low heat, not high, and added generous butter that melted and foamed without browning. When the butter's foam subsided, indicating proper temperature, she poured in the egg mixture and immediately reduced the heat to low. Here was her secret. She didn't stir constantly like most cooks. Instead, she let the eggs sit undisturbed for 30 seconds, allowing the bottom to barely set, then gently pushed them from the edges toward the center using a rubber spatula, tilting the pan to let uncooked egg flow to the edges. She continued this patient, gentle folding motion, creating large and soft curds rather than small, dry pieces. Crucially, she removed the pan from heat when the eggs were still slightly undercooked and glistening with moisture. They would continue cooking from residual heat. Soft cottage cheese and peaches became the ultimate gentle meal when Grandma needed something nourishing for someone recovering from illness or dental work, or simply for light summer lunches when the family wanted something cool and refreshing. This combination was genius in its simplicity. Both components were naturally soft, required absolutely no cooking, and together provided complete nutrition with protein from the cottage cheese and vitamins from the fruit, all in a form that was easy to eat and digest. She chose small curd cottage cheese specifically because the tiny curds were more delicate and easier to eat than large curd varieties, and she preferred the creamed version rather than dry cottage cheese because the extra cream made everything smoother and helped it slide down more easily. Some grandmas blended the cottage cheese briefly in a food processor to make it even smoother and more uniform, creating texture similar to ricotta, which was especially helpful for those with swallowing difficulties. For the peaches, she used canned peach halves or slices rather than fresh, because canned peaches were consistently tender and sweet year-round, without any hard or fibrous areas that fresh peaches sometimes had near the pit. She drained them well, reserving some of the sweet syrup to drizzle over the top if desired, and cut them into small, spoon-sized pieces that required no cutting with a knife during eating. The combination of cool, creamy cottage cheese and sweet, tender peaches was remarkably refreshing and pleasant. Smooth-baked savory custard became an elegant solution when Grandma wanted something that felt special enough for Sunday brunch gatherings, yet was remarkably tender for family members needing gentle food. Unlike sweet custards for dessert, this savory version used eggs, milk, cream, and cheese to create something that was simultaneously light and satisfying, with texture so smooth and delicate it practically melted on the tongue without any chewing effort required whatsoever. Her recipe was simple, but required attention to technique for perfect results. She whisked together eggs with milk and heavy cream. The ratio was typically 4 eggs to 2 cups of total dairy, beating them just until blended without incorporating too much air that would create bubbles or spongy texture. Without this water bath, the edges would overcook and become rubbery, while the center remained liquid. It baked at 325 degrees for 40 minutes until just set. The center should still jiggle slightly when gently shaken because it would continue cooking from residual heat after removing from the oven. The finished custard was pale yellow with golden cheese throughout, smooth as silk and remarkably delicate. When spooned onto plates, it held its shape gently, but was tender enough to cut with a fork, with creamy texture similar to the softest flan. She served it warm or at room temperature, often alongside fresh fruit or a simple salad, creating a light but protein-rich meal perfect for Sunday brunch when extended family. Tender quiche Lorraine brought French elegance to American tables when Grandma wanted to serve something sophisticated, yet gentle enough for everyone to enjoy during Saturday luncheons with friends. Traditional quiche had a pastry crust, but for those needing completely soft food, she simply omitted the crust entirely and baked the custard, filling in a buttered pie dish, creating what was sometimes called a crustless quiche that was every bit as delicious but far more tender throughout. The filling was the star. She cooked bacon until crispy, then crumbled it finely so no large, tough pieces would require significant chewing. She scattered this bacon across the bottom of the buttered dish, along with grated Swiss or Gruyere cheese. The ratio was typically 4 eggs to 1½ cups of cream and half a cup of milk, beating them just until blended. She seasoned this mixture with salt, white pepper, and a pinch of nutmeg that complemented the cheese and bacon beautifully. She poured this custard over the bacon and cheese, and it baked at 350 degrees for 35 to 40 minutes, until just set with a slight jiggle in the very center. The water bath method she used for other custards wasn't necessary here because the bacon fat and cheese added enough moisture to prevent drying. The top developed beautiful golden color, while the interior remained creamy and tender. When cooled slightly and cut into wedges, the quiche was remarkably smooth and tender, with creamy custard studded with tiny bacon pieces and melted cheese throughout. Each bite was rich, savory, and required minimal chewing effort, yet felt substantial enough to serve as a main course. She paired it with a simple green salad and soft rolls, creating an elegant lunch that was gentle enough for elderly relatives, but sophisticated enough to serve at special gatherings, proving that French classics could be adapted thoughtfully for those needing softer textures without sacrificing the elegance and flavor that made them special. Creamy deviled ham on soft white bread became the quick lunch solution when Grandma needed something fast but nourishing for weekday gatherings when time was limited. Deviled ham, that distinctive canned meat that had been finely ground and seasoned, was already remarkably soft and spreadable, requiring no preparation beyond opening the can, which made it perfect for rushed days, or when someone needed food they could eat without any chewing effort whatsoever. Her preparation elevated this simple ingredient into something more appealing. She mixed the deviled ham with a bit of mayonnaise or softened cream cheese, which made it even smoother and creamier, while toning down the intensity of the spices slightly. She sometimes added finely minced sweet pickles or pickle relish for subtle tang and tiny texture variation, or a dash of Worcestershire sauce for extra depth, mixing everything until completely smooth and easily spreadable. Bread choice was crucial. She used the softest white sandwich bread available, the kind that was pillowy and tender rather than firm or crusty. She spread the deviled ham mixture generously on one slice, creating a thick layer that was substantial enough to feel like a proper meal rather than a thin smear. Some family members preferred it as an open-faced sandwich with just one slice of bread, while others liked it traditional sandwich style with a second slice on top. She cut these either into quarters for easier handling or left them whole, depending on preference. The result was a sandwich that was entirely soft and gentle. The bread was tender and easy to chew, the deviled ham filling was creamy and smooth, and everything was moist enough that it went down easily without needing any additional condiments or spreads. She often served these alongside creamy potato salad or soft fruit, like canned peaches, creating a complete lunch that was quick to prepare, yet satisfying to eat. This became a staple for weekday lunches when time was precious, but nutrition still mattered, proving that convenience foods like canned deviled ham could be part of wholesome meals when used thoughtfully and paired appropriately for family gatherings around her kitchen table. These 55 tender meals prove that gentle food can come from every category: eggs, dairy, fish, sandwiches, all prepared with care for those needing soft textures. Each recipe brought families together where everyone could eat comfortably without struggle. Thoughtful preparation, simple ingredients, and universal appeal. Let's discover 5 final classics to complete our collection. Finely chopped chicken salad became the perfect light lunch or sandwich filling when Grandma wanted something protein-rich but remarkably tender for Tuesday gatherings with neighbors who dropped by unexpectedly. The key to making chicken salad gentle enough for those with chewing difficulties was the fine texture. She didn't just dice the chicken into chunks like most recipes suggested. She minced it into the smallest possible pieces, almost paste-like in consistency. Using a sharp knife and patient chopping technique, she started with cooked chicken breast. This finely minced chicken she added mayonnaise generously, more than typical chicken salad recipes called for, because extra moisture helped the fine pieces bind together and made swallowing easier for those with difficulties. She mixed in finely minced celery that had been blanched first in boiling water for 2 minutes to soften it, ensuring no crunchy pieces remained to cause chewing difficulties. Some grandmas added sweet pickle relish for tang and additional moisture, finely minced hard-boiled eggs for extra richness and protein, or a tiny bit of prepared mustard for flavor depth, but always kept everything smooth and moist rather than chunky. The finished chicken salad was pale yellow from the mayonnaise coating every particle of chicken, with fine texture that held together beautifully on soft white bread, or could be eaten with a spoon like a spread if bread was too difficult. Each bite was creamy, smooth, and required minimal chewing effort, with tender chicken flavor enhanced by the mayonnaise and seasonings without any harsh or overpowering tastes. She served it on the softest white bread, available with crusts removed. This became a favorite at ladies' luncheons because it was refined enough for special occasions, yet gentle enough for everyone to enjoy comfortably, including elderly relatives who struggled with tougher foods, proving that with proper preparation and attention to texture, even chicken could be part of soft food meals that everyone at the table appreciated during afternoon gatherings when friends shared conversation and good food around her welcoming kitchen table. Soft tuna salad on pillowy bread provided quick, nourishing meals when Grandma needed something fast but gentle for Friday lunches, following meatless traditions that many families observed. Canned tuna was already remarkably tender, especially the solid white albacore variety packed in water rather than oil, requiring no cooking whatsoever to create the base for sandwich filling that was naturally soft and easy to eat without any chewing challenges for anyone at the table, regardless of age or dental situation. Her preparation method ensured maximum tenderness and moisture throughout. She drained the tuna thoroughly by pressing it gently in the can with the lid, then transferred it to a medium mixing bowl. Some grandmas added sweet pickle relish for tang and sweetness, finely minced hard-boiled eggs for extra protein and richness, or a tiny bit of prepared yellow mustard for subtle tang, but always kept everything smooth and moist to ensure easy eating without any large chunks or dry spots. The bread choice mattered enormously for making this truly gentle. She used the softest, freshest white sandwich bread available from the bakery, the kind that was pillowy and tender when squeezed rather than firm or dense, creating a thick layer that was substantial and satisfying. Then topped it with another slice, and pressed gently. Each bite combined soft bread with creamy, tender tuna salad that required minimal chewing effort and slid down easily. The mayonnaise kept everything moist enough that swallowing was effortless, and the fine texture meant no large chunks to struggle with. Creamy Welsh, rarebit on tender toast, brought British comfort to American tables when Grandma wanted something that felt special, yet was remarkably tender for Saturday evening suppers with family. Welsh rarebit was essentially rich cheese sauce elevated to main dish status, served over toast in a way that transformed simple, economical ingredients into something that tasted elegant and substantial enough to satisfy hungry family members. The key to making it gentle enough for those needing soft food was ensuring the toast stayed tender rather than becoming hard and crispy, and making the cheese sauce smooth and creamy without any lumps or stringy texture. She started by making a rich cheese sauce from scratch, melting several tablespoons of butter in a medium saucepan over medium heat, whisking in an equal amount of flour to create a blonde roux that would thicken the sauce, then gradually adding milk while stirring constantly with a wooden spoon until it thickened into smooth white sauce with no lumps whatsoever. To this base, she added grated sharp cheddar cheese, at least 2 cups for proper richness and flavor, stirring patiently until it melted completely into the sauce, creating gorgeous golden-orange liquid that was thick, glossy, and incredibly smooth. She seasoned it thoughtfully with dry mustard powder for depth of flavor that complemented the cheese beautifully. A generous dash of Worcestershire sauce for umami richness and complexity, and a pinch of cayenne pepper for subtle warmth that enhanced the cheese flavor without making it spicy or overwhelming. Some grandmas added a splash of beer for authentic Welsh flavor, though she often omitted it for family meals. The toast required special attention for those needing soft food. She lightly toasted thick slices of white bread, just enough to be warm and slightly firm, but not crispy or hard, keeping it tender enough that it would soften further when the hot cheese sauce was poured over it. Extra soft spaghetti with tender meat sauce adapted beloved Italian comfort food for those needing gentler textures, proving that even pasta dishes could be part of soft food meals when prepared with care and attention for Sunday evening suppers when the family gathered. The transformation happened through extended cooking times for both the pasta and the sauce, creating textures that were far more tender than typical preparations while maintaining the wonderful flavors that made spaghetti so beloved by all ages and one of America's favorite comfort foods. She started with the meat sauce, browning ground beef in her largest skillet until completely crumbled into tiny pieces with no large chunks remaining, then draining excess fat carefully before adding canned crushed tomatoes, tomato sauce for smoothness, tomato paste for richness and deep red color, and seasonings including minced garlic, dried oregano, basil, and a pinch of sugar to balance the tomato's natural acidity. The key difference from typical meat sauce was simmering time. Instead of the typical 30 minutes that most recipes suggested, she let this sauce bubble gently on the stovetop for a full hour, stirring occasionally to prevent sticking, which served 2 important purposes. The ground beef cooked until it was fall-apart tender rather than maintaining any chewiness or firmness, and the sauce thickened considerably and developed deep, rich flavor that tasted like it had simmered all day. For the spaghetti, she cooked it far longer than package directions suggested, typically 15 to 18 minutes instead of the recommended 8 to 10, until the pasta was genuinely soft throughout, with no firmness or al dente texture remaining in the center when you bit into a strand. This created noodles that were tender enough to require minimal chewing effort, though she was careful not to cook them so excessively long they became mushy and fell apart completely when stirred. Cloud-soft bread pudding in savory form became the ultimate comfort food when Grandma wanted to use up stale bread while creating something remarkably tender for Monday evening suppers following busy weekends. Most people knew bread pudding as dessert, sweet with raisins and cinnamon, but the savory version was equally wonderful and perhaps even more versatile, with custardy texture that was soft and gentle enough for anyone needing easy-to-eat food, yet substantial enough to serve as a complete meal when paired with soup or salad for family gatherings around her table. She started with day-old white bread that had softened slightly from sitting out. Fresh bread was too soft and fell apart, while bread that was too stale was tough, removing all crusts with a sharp knife to ensure maximum tenderness throughout, since crusts could be chewy and difficult for those with dental issues. She tore the bread into small bite-sized pieces and placed them in a generously buttered baking dish, creating an even layer that would absorb the custard mixture. Over this, she poured a rich custard made from beaten eggs, whole milk, heavy cream for richness, and seasonings including salt, freshly ground black pepper, and dried herbs like thyme or sage that added wonderful savory depth. The bread soaked in this liquid for 15 minutes, during which time she pressed it down occasionally with a spatula to ensure every piece was saturated and soft, absorbing the egg mixture until no dry spots remained. She added grated cheese. Sharp cheddar or Swiss worked beautifully, distributing it evenly throughout, and sometimes included bits of cooked ham or crumbled cooked sausage for those who could handle additional texture and wanted more protein, though the base version without meat additions was perfectly satisfying and complete. The dish baked uncovered at 350 degrees for 40 minutes until the custard set completely, and the top developed beautiful golden brown color with slightly crispy edges, while the interior remained remarkably soft and custardy. When a knife inserted in the center came out clean, it was ready. The interior texture was somewhere between soufflé and quiche, with bread pieces that had absorbed all the egg mixture and become tender enough to eat with just a spoon. No knife needed. These 60 no-chew dinners prove our grandmas were absolute kitchen geniuses who understood that tender food didn't mean sacrificing flavor, satisfaction, or dignity. From fall-apart pot roast that melted on the tongue to creamy casseroles that required just a spoon, from silky soups that warmed from within to custards so delicate they dissolved instantly, every single recipe delivered complete nutrition and comfort in forms that anyone could enjoy, regardless of dental challenges, swallowing difficulties, or age-related changes that made eating harder than it should be. What made these meals truly special wasn't just their remarkable tenderness. It was the love baked into every bite, the patience required for 3-hour braises, the attention to detail that ensured no tough pieces remained, and the understanding that food is about more than nutrition. It's about gathering around tables, sharing meals with family, feeling cared for and included, and experiencing the comfort that only home cooking can provide. Grandmas knew that everyone deserved to eat real food that tasted good, looked appealing, and brought joy rather than struggle to mealtimes. The beautiful truth hidden in these recipes is that tender food can be delicious, elegant, and satisfying when prepared with knowledge and care. You don't need fancy equipment, culinary training, or expensive ingredients, just patience, proper techniques, and the willingness to adjust cooking times and textures thoughtfully. Stop scrolling and start cooking comfort right now. Pick one recipe from this collection, just one, and make it this week for someone who needs gentle, loving food. Watch their face light up when they can eat without struggle, without pain, without feeling left out. And these recipes aren't just meals, they're acts of love that bring dignity and joy back to the table. Share your memories with us. Which of these 60 dinners did your grandmother or mother make for family gatherings? Do you remember the aroma filling the kitchen? The comfort of that first tender bite? Tell us in the comments below. Let's keep these precious recipes and memories alive for everyone who needs them. Your story might inspire someone to cook with love today.